I'm sitting in my lawyer's office, hands shaking as I watch my wife of 32 years destroy what's left of our marriage. Patricia sits across from me with her attorney, wearing that cold smile I've grown to hate over the decades. "You've been a pathetic loser our entire marriage, Jerry," she says, her voice cutting through the sterile air. "The least you can do is give me what I deserve for putting up with your failures." Her lawyer slides papers across the mahogany table. She wants half of my $600,000 business sale, half of everything I built in secret while she spent years tearing me down with her words. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead as I stare at the documents. 32 years of marriage, and this is how it ends. Not with love or understanding, but with lawyers and demands for money she thinks she's entitled to. Patricia leans back in her leather chair, arms crossed. "Face it, Gerald. Without me, you never would have amounted to anything. I made sacrifices for your pathetic dreams." The words hit like they always do, but something's different this time. I'm not the broken man she thinks she's dealing with anymore. It wasn't always like this. When I met Patricia in college, I was 23 and full of dreams. She was the most beautiful girl on campus, long blonde hair, perfect smile, from a family with more money than I'd ever seen. I was studying engineering, working nights to pay for school. Patricia was studying communications, though she barely attended classes. Her father owned 3 car dealerships, so money was never an issue for her. Those early days felt magical. She'd laugh at my jokes, hold my hand as we walked across campus. When she agreed to go out with me, I felt like the luckiest guy alive. But even then, there were signs I chose to ignore. Little comments about my clothes being too casual, or my dreams being unrealistic. She'd say things like, "Engineering is so boring, Jerry, you should think bigger." When I'd get excited about a project or share an idea, she'd smile that patient smile. "That's nice, honey, but maybe focus on getting good grades first." I thought she was trying to help me. I thought she cared about my future. Looking back, I realized she was already building the foundation of doubt that would define our marriage. After graduation, I was eager to start my own engineering firm. I had ideas, energy, and enough saved money to give it a real shot. Patricia had other plans. "Starting a business is so risky, Jerry," she'd say, her voice dripping with concern. "What if you fail?" "We need stability." Every time I mentioned entrepreneurship, she'd bring up stories of failed businesses she'd heard about. Friends of friends who lost everything chasing stupid dreams. She made it sound like wanting to build something was childish. "You're not built for that kind of pressure," she'd tell me during our quiet dinners. "Some people are entrepreneurs, and some people work for entrepreneurs. There's nothing wrong with being practical." Her words wormed their way into my brain. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being foolish thinking I could build something from nothing. The more she talked, the smaller my dreams became. When I finally gave up on the business idea, Patricia seemed relieved. "See? You're already making smarter decisions. I'm proud of you for being realistic." But inside, something had died. A part of me that believed in possibilities had been slowly strangled by her reasonable-sounding doubts. Patricia pushed me toward a safe corporate job at Peterson Engineering. It wasn't what I wanted, but she made it sound like the mature choice, the responsible choice. "This is how successful people build their lives," she'd say. "Steady income, good benefits, real security. Not like those fly-by-night dreamers." I climbed the corporate ladder for 25 years. I was good at my job, respected by colleagues, and earned decent money. But every promotion felt empty. I wasn't building anything that mattered to me. Patricia enjoyed being the wife of a successful executive. She'd dress up for company parties, charm my coworkers, and bask in the status it gave her socially. But at home, nothing I did was ever enough. "Johnson's husband just made partner at his firm," she'd say over breakfast. "When are you going to step up your game?" Or, "The Millers bought a new BMW. Why can't you negotiate a better salary?" Every achievement was followed by criticism about what I hadn't accomplished yet. Success wasn't something to celebrate. It was just proof that I could do better if I tried harder. The corporate job that was supposed to give us security became another source of her disappointment in me. 15 years ago, I started spending time in our garage. At first, it was just to escape Patricia's constant criticism. I'd told her I was organizing or doing maintenance, but really I was hiding. That's when I began working on something that had been bothering me for years. The water filtration systems I dealt with at Peterson Engineering were expensive and inefficient. I knew there had to be a better way. It started as sketches on old napkins, then rough prototypes built from parts I'd buy at hardware stores. Patricia would walk past the garage and roll her eyes. "Still playing with your little projects?" she'd ask with that condescending tone. "Maybe spend that time on something useful, like fixing the kitchen sink." She had no idea what I was actually building. To her, it was just another example of my tendency to waste time on meaningless hobbies. The work became my therapy. While Patricia spent evenings watching TV and complaining about her day, I was in the garage discovering something incredible. My engineering background was finally being put to use on something I cared about. After 3 years of testing, I had something revolutionary. My filtration system could remove 99.7% of contaminants from water at a fraction of current costs. The breakthrough came from combining traditional filtration with a unique electromagnetic process I'd developed. I'd been filing patents in secret, documenting everything meticulously. Every test, every improvement, every failure was recorded in notebooks I kept hidden in the garage. The system wasn't just good, it was groundbreaking. It could provide clean water to communities that couldn't afford traditional systems. It could revolutionize how we think about water treatment. But I kept it secret from Patricia. Her reaction to my previous ideas had taught me to protect this one. She'd find some way to tear it down, to make me doubt myself again. Instead, I worked quietly. Nights, weekends, early mornings before work, I'd test components, adjust designs, and slowly build something that could change everything. Patricia thought I was going through a midlife crisis, spending too much time on garage hobbies. She had no clue I was developing technology that would eventually be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she called me a failure, I was creating the biggest success of my life. After 5 years of development, I started reaching out to environmental engineers and water treatment facilities. I was terrified they'd reject my ideas, just like Patricia always did. The response was overwhelming. The first engineer I contacted spent 2 hours on the phone with me, asking detailed questions about my process. "This could change everything," he said. Orders started coming in, small at first, rural communities, schools with limited budgets, international aid organizations. Each sale validated years of secret work. I opened a business bank account Patricia knew nothing about. For the first time in decades, I was earning money from something I'd created with my own hands and mind. The feeling was intoxicating. After 25 years of climbing someone else's corporate ladder, I was building something that mattered. Something that helped people access clean water. But I kept everything hidden. At dinner, Patricia would still make comments about my lack of ambition, while I sat there knowing I was generating more money from my hobby than many people made at their full-time jobs. The secret success felt powerful. For once in our marriage, I knew something she didn't. I had value she couldn't see or diminish. 2 years ago, I finally gathered the courage to quit Peterson Engineering. I'd saved enough money to survive for a year, and my filtration business was growing fast enough to support us. Patricia's reaction was nuclear. She screamed at me for 3 hours straight, calling me irresponsible, delusional, and completely insane. "You're throwing away 25 years of security for another one of your stupid fantasies," she yelled. "You're going to ruin us, we'll lose the house, the cars, everything." But something had changed in me. Her words still stung, but they didn't destroy me like they used to. I'd seen proof that I could create value, that my ideas had worth. "I believe in this, Patricia," I said quietly. "I think it could be something special." She laughed that cruel laugh I'd heard so many times. "You don't have what it takes to run a business, Jerry. You never have. Face reality for once in your pathetic life." The old me would have crawled back to Peterson Engineering the next day. But something inside me had shifted. I'd tasted success, and I wasn't going to let her take it away this time. While Patricia raged about my irresponsibility, my business was quietly generating $50,000 per month. Orders were pouring in from around the world. Water treatment facilities, environmental groups, even some government contracts. I kept the separate business account hidden, depositing checks and managing finances during my lunch breaks at coffee shops. Patricia thought I was desperately looking for another corporate job. For the first time in decades, I experienced what real success felt like. Not climbing someone else's ladder, but building my own. The work was challenging, but fulfilling. I was solving real problems for real people. Communities in developing countries were getting access to clean water because of technology I'd developed in my garage. At home, Patricia continued her daily routine of criticism and complaints. But her words were starting to bounce off me. I had proof now that I wasn't the failure she'd convinced me I was. The secret success felt like a shield. Every morning, I'd check the business account balance and remember who I really was underneath 30 years of her emotional abuse. I started standing a little taller, speaking up more during conversations, and refusing to automatically accept blame for every problem in our marriage. Patricia sensed something changing in me, and it made her more vicious. The verbal abuse intensified as she tried to reassert control over my emotions and self-worth. "You're delusional if you think this little water thing is going anywhere," she'd say during breakfast. "You're going to embarrass yourself when it inevitably fails." She'd bring up every past failure, every abandoned dream, every time I'd tried and didn't succeed. But her ammunition felt weaker now because I had current evidence of success. "Remember when you thought you could day trade?" she'd ask with that smug smile. "Or when you wanted to write that book? You start things, Jerry, but you never finish them." The old me would have agreed with her, accepted her version of my history. But now, I'd actually finished something. I'd built something valuable that people wanted to buy. Her increased aggression told me she was losing power over me. The dynamic that had defined our marriage for 3 decades was shifting, and she was fighting to maintain control. But I was no longer the broken man she'd spent years creating. I'd found my strength in that garage, and she couldn't take it away. Last year, Patricia accidentally discovered one of my patent certificates while looking for tax documents. Instead of pride or celebration, her first thought was calculating its value. She didn't confront me directly. Instead, she started asking casual questions about my little project. How many customers did I have? What were they paying? How big could it really get? I thought she was finally showing interest in my work. For a brief moment, I hoped we might repair our marriage by sharing this success together. But Patricia was conducting reconnaissance. She began secretly investigating my business, hiring a private investigator to track my finances and gather information about my patents, all while continuing to call me a failure to my face every single day. The betrayal was stunning once I discovered it. While I'd been hoping for her support and partnership, she'd been calculating how to profit from work she'd spent years discouraging. She never asked about the technology, the impact on communities, or how proud I felt about solving problems. She only cared about the money and what percentage she could claim. It was the final proof that our marriage was beyond repair. Patricia spent months consulting with divorce attorneys, financial advisors, and forensic accountants. She built her case while pretending nothing had changed between us. Every morning she'd kiss me goodbye and wish me luck finding a real job. Every evening she'd ask how my job search was going and remind me that we needed stable income. Meanwhile, she was secretly documenting everything about my business, recording our conversations and photographing my workshop. She was building evidence to maximize her divorce settlement. The private investigator she hired followed me to meetings, tracked my bank deposits, and identified every client contract. Patricia knew more about my business operations than I realized, but she kept up the charade. During dinner, she'd still make comments about my unrealistic dreams and how I needed to grow up and get serious about our future. The level of deception was breathtaking. For months, she was planning to destroy our marriage while maintaining the emotional abuse that had defined our relationship. When I finally discovered what she'd been doing, I realized I'd been living with a stranger for 32 years. 6 months ago, a major corporation offered me $600,000 for my business and patents. It was life-changing money, validation of everything I'd built in secret. I was ready to share the good news with Patricia, thinking it might finally heal our broken marriage. Maybe she'd see that I wasn't the failure she'd convinced herself I was. The offer included ongoing consulting fees and royalties from future sales. It would set us up financially for the rest of our lives. We could travel, buy a better house, enjoy our later years together. I planned to surprise her with dinner at our favorite restaurant. I'd tell her about the offer, explain how the business had grown, and ask for her forgiveness for keeping it secret. In my naive optimism, I thought success might save our marriage. I thought she'd be proud of what I'd accomplished and excited about our future together. I had no idea she already knew everything and was preparing to take as much as possible through divorce proceedings. The surprise dinner never happened. 3 days before I planned to tell her, Patricia served me with divorce papers demanding 60% of the business sale. That's how I ended up in this lawyer's office, watching my wife of 32 years reveal her true nature. Patricia wasn't just asking for half the money. She was claiming she'd been an integral part of my work. Her lawyer presented a case that she'd emotionally supported my efforts and sacrificed her own career for my success. According to their argument, the business wouldn't exist without her contributions. I sat there in stunned silence as they painted a picture of Patricia as a supportive spouse who'd enabled my achievements through her sacrifices and encouragement. The narrative was so divorced from reality that I wondered if we'd been living in the same house for 3 decades. Mrs. Hoffman provided the emotional foundation that allowed her husband to pursue his inventive work, her attorney explained. She maintained the household, supported his dreams, and deserves compensation for her role in his success. Patricia nodded solemnly, playing the part of the devoted wife who'd been taken for granted. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but the legal implications were serious. If they could prove her claims, she might actually get the majority of my business sale. My lawyer discovered that Patricia had been documenting everything for months. She'd recorded conversations, photographed my workshop, and built a comprehensive case to maximize her settlement. The evidence she'd gathered was extensive. Photos of patent certificates, audio recordings of me discussing the business, financial records she'd obtained through the private investigator. But as we reviewed her evidence more carefully, a different picture emerged. The recordings actually captured her constant criticism and dismissal of my work. In one audio file, she could be heard saying, "Stop wasting time on that stupid water thing and focus on finding a real job." In another, she called my patents worthless pieces of paper and told me I was living in a fantasy world. Her carefully planned evidence was backfiring. Instead of proving she'd supported my success, it documented years of emotional abuse and discouragement. My lawyer smiled as we listened to Patricia's own recordings. "She's given us everything we need to prove she had no involvement in your work," he said. The woman who'd spent months planning my destruction had accidentally documented her own cruelty. My former colleagues at Peterson Engineering came forward with devastating testimony about Patricia's treatment of me at company events. They described watching her publicly humiliate me, constantly put me down, and flirt with other executives, while I stood nearby, looking embarrassed. She'd make jokes about his lack of ambition right in front of everyone, one colleague testified. We all felt sorry for Gerald. She was brutal to him. Another coworker remembered Patricia saying at a Christmas party, "My husband's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he's reliable." The stories painted a clear picture of systematic emotional abuse spanning decades. Patricia hadn't supported my career. She'd undermined it at every opportunity. Most damaging was testimony about her multiple affairs with other company executives. Several people had witnessed her inappropriate behavior at corporate functions. She'd disappear with different men throughout the evening, one witness stated. Everyone knew what was happening except Gerald. My lawyer compiled these testimonies into a comprehensive character profile that destroyed Patricia's claim of being a supportive spouse. The colleagues I'd worked with for 25 years were finally telling the truth about what they'd observed. My meticulous documentation over 15 years became my strongest defense. Every patent filing, every prototype test, every business decision had been recorded with dates and timestamps. The paper trail proved Patricia had no knowledge of or involvement in my breakthrough work. In fact, it showed the opposite, that I'd deliberately hidden the project from her. My notebooks contain detailed records of her discouraging comments and negative reactions to my earlier inventive attempts. I documented her emotional abuse without realizing it would one day serve as legal evidence. Bank records showed that every penny invested in the business came from my corporate salary or personal savings. Patricia had contributed nothing financially to the development. Patent applications were filed in my name alone, with no mention of spousal involvement. The dates proved I'd been working on the technology for years before she even knew it existed. Most importantly, the timeline showed that my biggest breakthroughs happened during periods when Patricia was most critical of my work. The evidence was overwhelming and unshakable. I'd accidentally built an airtight legal case simply by being thorough and organized. The private investigator I'd quietly hired 6 months ago uncovered Patricia's multiple affairs over the years. She'd been emotionally and financially unfaithful while systematically destroying my self-worth. The evidence included photos, credit card records, and witness statements proving she'd been cheating throughout our marriage. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and gifts purchased for other men, all paid for with our joint accounts. She'd been living a double life, maintaining relationships with at least 3 different men over the past decade. The investigator had documented everything with surveillance photos and financial records. Most shocking was discovering she'd been telling her lovers that I was a pathetic loser and that she was planning to take him for everything in a divorce. One recorded phone conversation captured her saying, "Gerald's too stupid to realize what I'm doing. I'll get half his money and start over with someone who isn't such a failure." The evidence revealed the depth of her deception and cruelty. While destroying my confidence at home, she'd been betraying our marriage with multiple men. Her claims of sacrifice and support were exposed as complete fabrications. A forensic accountant revealed that Patricia had been secretly siphoning money from our joint accounts for years, funding her affairs and hiding assets in accounts I knew nothing about. She'd been systematically stealing from our marriage while accusing me of financial irresponsibility. The accountant found evidence of $127,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 5 years. The money had been used for vacations with other men, expensive gifts for her lovers, and a secret savings account she'd established in preparation for divorce. Mrs. Hoffman has been conducting financial infidelity for years, the accountant testified. She owes her husband significant money, not the other way around. Bank records showed luxury purchases I'd never seen, cash withdrawals I hadn't authorized, and transfers to accounts in her name only. She'd even taken out a credit card using our home as collateral without my knowledge. The debt was substantial and had been hidden from me completely. The financial forensics revealed that Patricia owed me money, not the reverse. Her demand for 60% of my business sale was looking increasingly absurd. The corporation that bought my business testified that their due diligence showed Patricia had zero involvement in the innovation. Their interviews with neighbors actually revealed she'd actively discouraged my work. We spoke with several people who confirmed Mrs. Hoffman frequently criticized her husband's project, the corporate representative testified. She was described as unsupportive and dismissive. The company's technical evaluation proved that my patents were entirely original work, developed without any collaboration or input from Patricia. Their experts had verified every aspect of the technology. This is clearly the product of one brilliant mind working alone, their chief engineer stated. There's no evidence of spousal involvement in the development process. The corporation's lawyers had investigated Patricia's claims thoroughly before making their purchase offer. They'd found no legal basis for her demands. Most damaging was their discovery that Patricia had tried to contact them directly, attempting to negotiate her own deal for a percentage of the sale price. The testimony proved she'd never been involved in the business and was simply trying to profit from work she'd actively opposed. A court-ordered psychological evaluation revealed that Patricia exhibited classic narcissistic personality disorder patterns. The psychologist's report detailed how she'd systematically emotionally abused me to maintain control. Mrs. Hoffman demonstrates consistent patterns of grandiosity, lack of empathy, and exploitation of intimate relationships, the report stated. Her behavior toward her husband constitutes psychological abuse. The evaluation included interviews with both of us, psychological testing, and analysis of the documented evidence from our marriage. She has systematically undermined her husband's self-worth while maintaining her own sense of superiority, the psychologist explained. This is textbook emotional manipulation. The report described how Patricia had isolated me from potential success, convinced me I was incompetent, and maintained control through constant criticism. The subject appears incapable of genuine empathy or partnership. Her relationships are transactional, focused on what others can provide for her. The psychological evaluation provided scientific backing for what I'd experienced, but couldn't articulate for 30 years. Patricia's own behavior during the evaluation had revealed her true nature to a trained professional. Patricia's carefully crafted case collapsed completely. Every piece of evidence she'd thought would help her instead revealed the truth about our marriage. Her recorded conversations proved abuse, not support. Her documented research showed calculation, not partnership. Her hidden affairs demonstrated betrayal, not sacrifice. The judge reviewed the mountain of evidence with obvious disgust. Patricia's claims weren't just wrong, they were fraudulent attempts to profit from systematic emotional abuse. This court finds no evidence that Mrs. Hoffman contributed to her husband's business success, the judge stated firmly. In fact, the evidence shows she actively hindered his efforts. Patricia's lawyer tried desperately to salvage something from the wreckage, but there was nothing left to argue. The truth was overwhelming and undeniable. I watched my wife of 32 years realize that her carefully planned destruction of our marriage had backfired completely. For the first time in decades, I felt truly powerful, not because I was destroying her, but because I'd finally escaped the prison of her manipulation. The pathetic loser she'd created was gone forever. I didn't just defend against Patricia's lawsuit, I counterattacked. My lawyer filed for emotional distress damages, fraud, and recovery of the money she'd stolen over the years. We demanded compensation for decades of psychological abuse, financial infidelity, and her fraudulent attempts to claim ownership of my work. The evidence supporting our counterclaims was overwhelming. Recorded abuse, documented affairs, stolen money, and expert testimony about the psychological damage she'd inflicted. Mr. Hoffman deserves compensation for the systematic emotional terrorism he endured, my lawyer argued. His wife's behavior was calculated and cruel. Patricia's confident demeanor finally cracked. She'd expected to take my money and disappear with her lovers. Instead, she was facing financial ruin and public exposure of her true character. The woman who'd spent 30 years calling me a failure was about to lose everything while I emerged victorious. For decades, I'd absorbed her abuse because I believed I deserved it. Now I understood that her cruelty was about her own inadequacy, not mine. The man with nothing left to lose had become her worst nightmare. The final judgment exceeded my wildest expectations. Patricia received nothing from the business sale and was ordered to pay me $200,000 in damages and stolen funds. The judge delivered a scathing rebuke of her behavior, calling it systematic emotional terrorism designed to maintain control through psychological manipulation. This court finds Mrs. Hoffman's conduct reprehensible, the judge stated. She has attempted to profit from decades of abuse while portraying herself as a victim. Patricia sat in stunned silence as the judgment was read. Her entire plan had not only failed, but completely backfired. I felt no joy in her destruction, only relief that the truth had finally been acknowledged. 30 years of gaslighting and abuse were officially recognized and condemned. The settlement included my full ownership of all patents, complete control of the business sale proceeds, and compensation for the psychological damage she'd inflicted. Patricia left the courtroom bankrupt and exposed. Her carefully maintained public image was destroyed, and her financial future was ruined. The pathetic loser she'd created was now a successful businessman, while her life lay in shambles. 6 months later, I've moved to a coastal town where I'm starting a new water treatment company. The ocean air feels like freedom after decades of suffocating criticism. Patricia, bankrupt and socially ostracized, has become a pariah in our old community. Her friends discovered the truth about her affairs and financial fraud. She lost everything. My new business is already being courted by international buyers. The technology I developed in secret is now recognized as revolutionary, with patents worth millions. I wake up every morning excited about the work ahead. No one criticizes my ideas or tells me I'm dreaming too big. The silence Patricia left behind has been filled with possibility. Sometimes I think about the young engineer I used to be, full of dreams and ambition. Patricia spent 30 years convincing me that person never existed. But he did. He was just buried under decades of abuse. The pathetic loser she created was finally dead. In his place stands a successful man who learned that true strength isn't about fighting back immediately. It's about quiet persistence, protecting your dreams, and letting justice unfold naturally. I built something beautiful while she destroyed herself with her own cruelty. That feels like the perfect ending to our story.